I was actually having a conversation with, do you know Murray Last? He's this anthropologist at UCL. And he was just saying that the West, mainly the US and the UK, they're increasingly just becoming quite disillusioned with Nigeria and sort of giving up with Nigeria. There's a lot less interest in Nigeria now than there was perhaps 15, 20 years ago. And he's just saying how his main concern was, because he's a very fervent believer in Nigeria, let's say, because he sees the potential and he's been there for years, and it really disappoints him that there is this increasing neglect from the US and the UK. And he was just saying that he doesn't know how Nigeria is going to deal with this, as the UK and US continue to lose interest. Where is this sort of, how they're going to be galvanized or supported in the upcoming years, especially as the economic situation seems to get worse and the politics and whatnot.
Well, I think it's not just a Nigeria thing. I think it's more, it's even broader than Nigeria, and it's even beyond Africa. I think the way the world is going has been trending in the last few years. I think countries are now increasingly looking inwards, and you see that with Trump and all of his policies, right? There's this, attention on looking at, looking at what's going on within your country than this idea of globalization. So in a way, I think it's globalization is constricting, if that's even a better word to use. And so countries in Africa and even in the developing world is something that they will have to deal with, over time. I remember in some 10 years ago or so, about 2013, 2014, when, in fact, the US came up with a strategy that they would start, producing much of the crude oil and reduce importation of crude oil from Nigeria and other African countries, and become perhaps self-reliant in crude oil production. And within 10 years, it happened, right? They become the largest oil producing country in the world, at some point struggling with Saudi Arabia up and down. And what that meant for Nigerian crude was that Nigeria had to look for buyers elsewhere, right? Move to Asia, move to other countries, other European countries. So we saw that and we went through that phase. So I think it's more about the fact that maybe people are seeing that, or these countries are seeing that, look, globalization has a downfall. It doesn't come with all the good things that we used to enjoy. So now it feels like we've done too much for the rest of the world and we need to put ourselves first. And you also see that with issues relating to immigration. Countries are putting themselves first and saying, look, how can I make my own people much better, and then care less about what's happening elsewhere. In a way, I think it just tells you that, look, as a country, especially from the policy angle, I mean, we need to even be more prepared for things like this, especially in the next 3 to 4 years, right? You don't have friends as you used to have, so you need to be very prepared in the sense that, how do you strengthen governance within your country? How do you ensure that whatever money you get, you use them judiciously? How do you ensure that you even strengthen negotiations, bilateral negotiations with countries? And you must have something to offer, which is something I've always argued in Nigeria, that, look, you have to produce more and you have to look beyond oil. Not necessarily, oil is still important, crude oil is still important, but you have to produce other things. You have to diversify your production and offer things to the world, right? It'll get to a point where, look, you'll become so important that you can't be ignored. And I think that's where a country like Nigeria how it needs to position itself. And just look at the immense potential that Nigeria has, whether it's in agriculture, minerals, whether it's in industry, human capital. Like, it's huge. Like, not just Nigeria. I get sometimes worried when I see 44 African presidents, or even more than 54 African presidents, going to the US to see the president, or the Chinese US, the China Africa conference, and you have a list of African presidents there to see the Chinese president. I'm just wondering, like, you guys need to, you should know what you have and know that the world needs you.